Hi, continuing on our beamforming in Wi-Fi and 5G series, and I want to clear the air on some points. This is part 2, and our focus will be on maybe talking a little bit about the nuances of digital beamforming. My name is Shrikant, and I'm with NanoCell Networks. Remember that in part 1, we had spoken about various ways in which beamforming could be done. Analog was where we started. We still do some with certain limitations. Digital is really the new area where we are exploring more with a lot of interesting possibilities. And we'll talk about some very nice things about this as we go along. And hybrid, especially for high frequency, large antenna kind of deployment, where there are challenges from a complexity and a few other conditions. Okay. So you can keep this idea in mind, but today our focus will be more to give you some insight on digital beamforming. What is digital beamforming? And since we are also more towards a Wi-Fi and 5G system, both being OFDM based, we will use the OFDM kind of systems. So in a nutshell, the digital beamforming is typically in this kind of context implemented what we call pre-IFFT in an OFDM. And the beamforming is represented here by multiplying the symbols that you want to transmit in a certain subcarrier. Remember, subcarriers in OFDM systems sometimes referred to as tones, sometimes resource elements, whatever they might be. They are going to be now tweaked with a complex number, which is the guts of the beamforming, the digital beamforming implementation. And these are done differently at different antenna ports if you're looking at a 3GPP system, or you can look at it as space-time streams in the case of a Wi-Fi system. Whatever it might be, this W entities are the amplitude and phases at a subcarrier level that we do differently at the different antenna ports or space-time streams, basically based on channel feedback typically, so that we have these kinds of effects, the beam effect, okay, which is a more of a qualitative explanation that we talked about last time. Okay, so what do these W's really do if we want to get a little deeper there, which is our objective without too much confusion and just maybe a little bit of math. So if you take this multiple antenna system, which is where beamforming comes into play, remember we talked that TX and RX both can be involved. Okay, here we'll probably take more of the TX condition because that's where the standards come in. The simple math model that we use connecting things at a subcarrier is this, the matrix equation between the TX and RX. You might wonder, what do these matrix entities really refer to, connecting the input to the output? And of course, this is just noise. This is a representation of the multipath related effects. Okay, I'll just put multipath. So the multipath, which is always present, though not shown explicitly here, uh, is going to cause some amplitude, net amplitude and phase effect between a TX and an RX, and that is what this matrix contains. We'll take the simplest case of a transmit beamforming, two antennas, one receiver, so that we have very simplified things. And so this matrix now boils down to a vector. Okay, and now you can see we are transporting a symbol which we call X in that subcarrier, and our beamforming is doing this on the two antennas, the W1, W2. Remember, this is all per subcarrier. Remember the previous page where we showed the W1, W2 at the pre-IFFT level. Okay, this is the beamforming. So you must wonder, what is this beamforming going to do? Remember, the net effect of the beamforming and the multipath channel gives us this effect on the symbol. And what do you ideally want here? You want the multipath components associated with the different transmit antennas to be combining nicely for you. So at a mathematical level, think of this W1 and W2 trying to counter all the effects of H11 and H12, which is adjusting for the phase, adjusting for the amplitudes, so that it's as if you got something like a peak here. Okay, coherent sort of way by which we are getting the symbol across. There are a few ways in which people can, design this W1 and W2. So that's why I'm not specifically giving any solutions, but I want you to understand that digital beamforming works at this level where it takes the multipath channel feedback into account and then tweaks those numbers in accordance with the channel so that we can basically have, you can say, a nice effect towards that particular receive antenna. Okay, so I hope this demystifies a little bit of digital beamforming. Remember that digital beamforming can work even in a multipath environment. Okay, and so it is not necessarily that the transmission is going in a certain directions. We have not assumed any special antennas here. Okay, and we will see that digital beamforming can create a lot more possibilities once we get this basic idea, which I have hopefully explained in the simplest possible manner. Okay, hope this was useful. For more information, please see our website. We also offer courses through Wi-Fi Now Academy. So I hope that this information will be useful for you. Thank you.